Hello and welcome to Historical. I am your host, Peta Roberts. At Historical, we think your stories are historical. History is the story of you, and they deserve to be recorded and shared. Historical is the place you come to for advice on how to capture life story, tools to use, and how to complete your project. Listen to experts, memoir writers, and product reviews. Let's inspire you to start. Hello and welcome to episode 19 of Historical. So last week I spoke to Kathy Nelson, who was the CEO and founder of the Association of Personal Photo Organisers, APPO. Today I'm going to continue our digital journey just that little bit further and talk about some things that may be of interest to you when it comes to digitizing your images. As a personal historian, I help people capture their stories for their future and to share them with family and friends. But I also help people preserve their treasures, such as letters, documents, and family photos. I've helped families save and preserve literally thousands of photographs of all types, some of which date almost back to the invention of photography itself. Everything I talk about, I have come across as a problem to be solved or guidelines that I have needed to follow. So let's look at the specific topics that we'll cover. Firstly, analysing a photo, then organising photos, scanning photos, storing and sharing digitised photos, and then we might speak about more resources and perhaps a preservation plan. First, let's start off with the why of digitising and analysing a photograph. I have a family photograph that was taken probably around 115 years ago in Liverpool in the UK. It's of my grandfather, his siblings and his parents. It's the only photograph of the entire family together that survives to this day. And I wouldn't have it if it hadn't been for a little curiosity on my part. But that photo isn't just about one moment in a sunny day in 1902. It tells a story that is bigger than it. You see, my father always told me that my grandfather was born in a tribe of Native Americans. I never understood what that meant until I visited Argentina and found out the places where my grandfather and his family had lived. His parents have a very interesting history. They migrated separately to a barren and barely populated part of Patagonia, where they met and married. And indeed, my grandfather was born in the land of the Tuolchi tribe. Within 20 years of migration, the Roberts family doubled back to the UK, where their last child was born. But they didn't stay there either. They eventually migrated again, this time to Australia, where they all stayed. However, within 6 months of this photo being taken, the fourth and the youngest child had died. Within 10 years of this photo being given to me by a long-lost relative, they too were dead. My curiosity was the only thing that brought this photo to light. We need to appreciate that our photos are ephemeral and with us for perhaps a short time. It is our responsibility to take the reins and get on with tracking them down and committing them to pixels forever. I also wanted to make a second point, which is that every photograph comes with a story. Your challenge as you start your digitization project is to capture not only the image, but the story behind the photo. Who's in the picture? What were they doing? Who took the photo and why? What year was it? And where were they? That way, you and everyone who picks up the photo can appreciate every photograph for what it represents. Just because you know your photographs now doesn't mean future generations will. Use this test when you commit each photo to be digitized. What will my great-grandchild ask me about this photo and how she's related? Your great-nephew finds a collection and wants to know if his father is in any of the pictures. You would lose a lot if a digitization project ignored the humanity behind them. I'm going to put on my website a copy of guidelines that might prompt you to record all the details of a photograph. This guide was prepared and published by the National Archives, and it is titled Analyse a Photograph. It talks about meeting the photograph. Who do you notice first? What kind of photo is it? A portrait, landscape, selfie, event photo, etc. Is there a caption on it? Now observe its parts and list who the people are, the objects, and what activities were going on. Now make sense of the photo by figuring out who took the photo, where, and when is it from, and what was happening at this time in history when it was taken. Why was it taken? Lastly, use the photo as historical evidence, such as what did you find out from this photo that you never knew before. Perhaps you may need other historical documents to help you understand this photo more. When you aren't sure who is who in the picture, crowdsource. Take it to the family and friends for identification and to elicit stories about who is in the picture. Facebook is great for this. You should store this information about a photo with your photo collection. There's 2 ways to do that. One will be typing up a document, and a second way is going to be what's called metadata, and we'll get onto the metadata soon enough. Okay, let's move on to the second step of today's talk, and that is organising your photos, or as Kathy Nelson likes to say, hunt and gather. I encourage you to think about how you operate when it comes to dealing with pulling out your photos from storage. You're going to find photos in your garage, in your storage shed, in the closet, in the attic. Will you feel overwhelmed if you see large amounts of photos, or is it a challenge for you to organise them? You might prefer to retrieve just a small amount to start with, but whatever you do, the first part of any project is to hunt them all down and gather all your photos together so that you know how big the digitization project is. Understanding the size of the project will be helpful in estimating how long it will take you so that you can allocate time to get it done. So you're in a perfect place to start organising them. There's 2 reasons to organise your photos. One is that it will help you when you scan them so that you're not organising them as you scan them. They're already organised. You know exactly what order they're in. If you have to peel photos out of albums, pull them out of envelopes, unstaple photos from albums, then you won't get much scanning done. So get all that done to start with. The second reason for organising photos is that it gives you time to think about a naming convention. All right, a naming convention, what's that? Every single photograph needs to have a unique name to identify it. So how will you name each image file? Will you name it by date, by event, by year, timeline, or subject? Let's look at the ideal name of each photo. You should use numbers as a prefix to all images, then the description. Number, such as years, are a great start. Then the name of the person or location, then the consecutive number. For example, I have a photo, it's of a family with grandma at the beach. So I'm going to call the file 1955. That's the first part of the file description. Then underscore, and then I'll put grandma, underscore, then beach, and then 001. And then if I scan more photos that have grandma at the beach at that place in 1955, then it will be consecutively numbered as 002, then 003. Once you set up the file numbering system with a scanner, then all the subsequent files will be consecutively numbered, but you do need to set up the initial numbering system to start with. You can use folders to organize your photos, but as well use the name of the folder for the names of the photos in that folder. For example, the 1986 folder with all your photos from 1986. Use 1986 as the first part of your name for all the images in that folder. For example, 1986 underscore Easter underscore 001. Don't just call all the photos for Easter in that particular folder Easter 001, 002, because each year you might take Easter photos and they might get jumbled up. So you might have lots of different sets of photos called Easter underscore 001. So start with a year, and that way you can differentiate photos from one year to the next. You might end up with 2 images with the same name, even though you have diligently put them into different folders. But there is a chance in the future that they will be moved to the same folder. And you know computers, you accidentally change the setting so that files overwrite each other with the same name. So the important point again is to use a unique name for every single photo. Make sure it starts with the year then use a descriptor, and then you can organize them into folders. Once you create a naming convention, stick with it. Make it usable to you. Personalize it for how you use photos. It will allow you to quickly and easily name and place into your collection other photos that you come across. Okay, let's talk about the next part, which is about scanning. It's important that you thoroughly clean both the photo and the scanner before you start. The scanner's sensitive sensor will pick up even a speck of dust on the glass or in the photo. Try and maintain that dust-free environment when you set up your scanning station. Use a blower or a cloth. Although you can use photo editing software afterward to correct photos, it is time-consuming, especially if you can avoid things like scanning dust on photos to begin with. What kind of scanner do you use? Well, you might have access to 2 different types of scanners. One might be your home multi-function printer and scanner, or it could be a flatbed scanner. Have a look at the way that they do scan them, because there might be differences in the quality of the scan. If you're going to spend a lot of time doing this, you need to get the job done right. Flatbed scanners have the advantage of having dedicated software, which can help usually with tweaks that you might not get with a multi-function scanner. Most tweaks are in what's called the professional mode. If you're in a hurry or know nothing about scanning, the auto mode will usually provide a reasonably good quality and may be all you need. With flatbed scanners, sometimes the software also offers a color restore option. It's great. It restores color to faded old photographs. It really works very well, especially with those orange 60s and 70s photos. Most often there's more than one setting, so you can pick the one that matches the level of fading. If your scan utility doesn't offer color restore, then you'll just be scanning the original. You might need to use Photoshop later to restore the same color. Now let's talk about the quality of a scan. The quality of your scan is a function of how much information is stored about the image. That means how big the photo is, and the bigger the photo, the more information is stored about it. Secondly, the quality is affected by how much visual information per square inch is saved. And when we speak of image size, it will dictate how big of a hard drive or computer drive you will need to scan your entire photo collection. What you need to remember is that it's better to scan your images at a higher setting if you have images that you might want to crop later to make another larger image. Another example is where an old photo may have hidden details not seen by the naked eye. Once you scan an image at high resolution, you will be able to crop out backgrounds and make really interesting pictures of what is in the photo. So let's talk about these 2 dimensions of quality: size and visual information per square inch. Firstly, on size, I save increased size for small images, especially negatives. But not all scanning software can change the size of the image that you are scanning. Check your scanner first and be satisfied that you can do the entire project to your specifications before you start. There is original size, but with some scanners you can change it to, say, 200% or 800% of original size. With really small negatives, I tend to save it to 1000% of original size. The second aspect I talked about is measured by the dots or pixels per square inch. A DPI or PPI of 300 is pretty much sufficient for printing purposes. Archival quality is 600 DPI because at this higher setting more visual information is saved. So if you choose somewhere between these ranges, you should have a good image. I gave the example of scanning at a high resolution, which is useful for when you want to crop images. For example, if you scanned a photo at 300 DPI and then cropped a quarter of it to enlarge it back up to a 4:6, you can see that the resulting enlargement would have a DPI of much less than what you scanned it at 300 DPI. 300 DPI tends to be the standard for printing. So if you want to print a quarter of a photograph because you've cropped it, then you need to scan it at a much higher DPI, 600 or 800, when you make the selection at the scanning stage. This makes the point that it's better to start with a high resolution from the beginning of the scanning stage. When you save at high resolutions and when you save at a more than original size photo, this actually future-proofs your photo so that you can use them in various ways after you've scanned them. So think about building in that flexibility at the scanning stage. Okay, let's talk about types of digital files. The most common image types are JPEGs, which we identify with the suffix JPG. That is the format our photos on our phones are saved. However, usually with scanning, you can choose whether to save as a JPEG, a PDF, or a TIFF. So what does the JPEG acronym stand for? JPEG means Joint Photographics Expert Group, and this group creates standards for still image compression and processing. The big word there is compression. So TIFF is a tagged image format. A TIFF file is much larger than a JPEG file because a JPEG uses compression to save that data. JPEGs are lossy in compression in order to maximize the use of storage space. Algorithms are used to make the file smaller without a noticeable loss in degradation of the image. Much of the original photographic data is lost once the image is saved, but it's hard for the eye to detect. As the JPEG image is saved and processed, the data that was lost gets more noticeable. You can get poorer images from JPEGs that are processed extensively with photo editing software. One way to mitigate this problem is to keep an unedited original version of the file. In that way, if anything goes haywire during the editing process, you can always go back to the original version. TIFFs, on the other hand, are what's called lossless, and they can be saved without compression, which means that there is no loss of image quality however many times you process or save it. This means the file is much bigger originally than a JPEG because the original photographic information was saved. My suggestion is that you consider saving files as TIFF. This is the type of file that archivists use because it future-proofs photos better than JPEGs. But JPEGs are a popular, high-quality format for images. It can be hard to email TIFF files because they're so big, whilst JPEGs are relatively easy because they're smaller. So the difference in size between JPEGs and TIFFs can be something like 2 megabytes versus 20 megabytes. These parameters again affect the size of the drive to save your whole photo collection. The same software is used to look at TIFFs as it is to look at JPEGs. So you won't have to worry about getting special software just to look at your files if you save them in the TIFF format. Okay, I also mentioned PDF format. PDF format is a portable document file format. That's usually used for documents rather than photos, so I don't suggest that you save photos in the PDF format. Okay, so let's recap here. You've sorted, organized, and cleaned your entire photo collection. You have figured out a numbering system that involves year. You've located a scanner and you've gone through the scanner and tested it. You've decided whether or not to save your photos as TIFF or JPEGs. You've decided whether to keep them as original file size or larger. And you've set the quality of the scan by looking at DPI or PPI. It seems like you're ready to start scanning. Okay, let's speak about what happens after you finish scanning. After you finish scanning, you're going to worry about what we call the metadata. Once you have your JPEG or TIFF image up on the screen, you need to think about adding data about the picture. Again, this is not something to do during your scanning time, but afterwards when you're finished. Let me explain what metadata is. There's two types of metadata. One is EXIF, which is embedded in all digital images taken by a digital camera. It's useful for photographers to compare shutter speed, the light used, the type of lens used, etc. The second is what's called IPTC data, which stands for International Press Telecommunications Council. It was developed in the early 1990s and can be modified manually for every image. It includes things such as title, description, keywords, tags, and especially useful is copyright notices. The benefit of adding metadata is that it makes it easier to search for photos further down the track. It's the equivalent to writing information on the back of a physical photo. What I've learned about this job is that you get rewarded for putting effort in up front with organising photos. But you also get rewarded when you put effort in at this stage. Adding metadata makes your photos so much more easily searchable. You can update the metadata on every photo by right-clicking on the file. Then you click on Properties or Information, depending on the system you're using, and getting the option box that will allow you to add in more data in the blank fields. Adding metadata means typing in keywords such as people's names, who's in the photo, who are they with, the year it was taken, the place the photo was taken, why it was taken, and who took the photo. It is time intensive, especially when you add metadata for every photo, so be prepared for a bit of a time sink. If you think you'll only need to find a given photo every now and then, you don't need to get very elaborate. Having well-defined folder names and unique photo names is a quick way to find photos. But the metadata will live on with the photo, so no more fussing about who is in a photo. You can write it out and save it with every photo at this stage. Okay, so you've come this far, you've stuck it out. Now what's next? Well, what's next is saving. You need to make sure that you save a complete copy of all your images to what I call a digital hub. The digital hub is accessible, it's expandable, but it's not yet online. And let's think about how you're going to save to this digital hub. The digital hub for me is usually an external master hard drive that I save things to. And I follow what's called the 3-2-1 rule. Kathy Nelson spoke about this last week, so let's dive in a little bit and figure out what she meant. 3-2-1 rule means that you need to save 3 copies of everything, you need to save them on 2 different devices, and you need to have 1 backup that's actually off-site. The 3-2-1 rule was created by a photographer who said there are 2 types of people in this world, those who have experienced backup failure and those who will in the future. Now don't forget that hard copies are a backup as well. Not everything has to be electronic. And when we talk about off-site, when we say that one of those copies has to be off-site, typically a popular solution for this is the cloud, backing up information to the cloud. And maybe I should talk about backing up too. Let's look at that. Well, there's automatic, there's syncing, and there's manual backup. An automatic backup is where you're using software to time the copying of the data from your digital hub to another device. I get automatic backups on my external hard drive every morning at 6 a.m. No matter what's on my hard drive, it gets backed up to my cloud solution. Then there's the syncing backup, that's SYNC. This is where you've got a special folder that accesses your digital hub that you can access from other devices and access the same files at every device. Examples of syncing software include Google Drive, Microsoft OneDrive, and Dropbox. The last type of backup is a manual backup, where you physically copy and paste photos from one external hard drive to another external hard drive, or from your external hard drive to a solution in the cloud. Now the 3-2-1 rule doesn't just apply to those photos that you've scanned, it includes all your photos, those on your cameras, your cell phones. You need to commit to combining all photos and downloading them on a regular basis. Now how often you download and make sure that you copy the photos from your camera and cell phone, that's up to you, but just being able to put your photo digital collection in one place will be a huge step in making sure you can manage this eternal collection of photos that we always seem to find just grows and grows and grows. The reason I've differentiated between 3 different ways to backup is because following the 3-2-1 rule, you have to make 2 copies of all your digital collections once you've got a master at your digital hub. So you've got your digital hub copy, then you make 2 copies. How are you going to do that? Which backup solution are you going to use to do that? And with these 2 copies, you'll make sure that one is at least on a separate device or a different device to your digital hub. And then you're going to make sure that one of these copies is off-site or in the cloud. Okay, so that's an explanation of the 3-2-1 rule. I hope that's helpful. Okay, so the topics that we covered today were analyzing a photo, organizing photos, scanning photos, talking about scanners, quality, file types, and metadata. And lastly, we've talked about storing photos, the 3-2-1 rule especially, and the backing up strategies that you can use. And I hope these topics have been useful to you. In future episodes of Historical, I'd like to cover preservation as well as sharing photos. But that's future episodes. Thank you for joining me in another episode of Historical. Feel free to let me know how you like Historical, either on iTunes or where you get your podcasts. Or you can email me, Peta, P-E-T-A, at Storycal, STORYICAL.com. Never miss an episode by joining us at our website, storycal.com. May Historical inspire you to story the historical, because it's never too soon to get started, but often it can be too late.